3 weeks after I bought my father's old ranch back, I watched a black SUV roll up my dirt drive like it owned the dust. It stopped at my gate, and a woman in spotless boots stepped out holding a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked past me, past the sagging porch, past the mesquite and the busted fence line, and said, real calm, like she was reading weather, "Mr. Hale, congratulations on your purchase. Unfortunately, your property is now subject to Maple Crest Community Authority, and we'll need you to sign these integration documents today." I didn't even answer at first. I just stared at her, because nothing rattles your brain faster than hearing someone casually claim jurisdiction over land you paid for in full. Then her passenger got out, younger guy, tight polo with a stitched logo, carrying a leather folder like he was delivering a sermon, and he added, "You're also in violation of several standards. We can avoid escalation if you cooperate." Escalation. That's a funny word when you're standing on your own land, holding your own keys, with your name on the deed. I remember thinking, okay, this is either a scam, or this is what happens when people get used to winning and forget what the word no sounds like. I took a slow breath, leaned my forearm on the top rail of the gate, and said, "Ma'am, this place has been outside any subdivision since before your committee learned how to print letterhead. So I'm going to need you to explain, real carefully, why you're standing on my fence line talking like I owe you rent." Her smile tightened. She tapped the clipboard once and said, "Because you're surrounded now, and the county overlay reflects that. It's a simple boundary alignment." Simple. Yeah, simple like theft, when you dress it up in khaki and call it community. Let me back up, because the part that makes people understand this isn't the SUV, it's why I was out there in the first place. My name's Cole Hale. I make my living in a boring way, the kind of boring that pays for mistakes. I investigate insurance fraud. I chase down the folks who torch their own warehouses, lose their equipment on paper, or suddenly discover water damage in a building that hasn't seen rain in 6 months. It's not glamorous. It's just a long, slow education in how confident liars sound when they think you don't have receipts. My dad, Henry Hale, didn't have receipts, not the kind that mattered. He had pride, calluses, and a stubborn love for 2 acres of dry, mean dirt outside a small town called Lark County, Texas. When I was a kid, that ranch felt like the entire world, a crooked little house, a leaning barn, wind that never stopped, and nights where the coyotes sounded close enough to count. Dad used to say, "Land ain't yours because you want it. It's yours because you work it." Then he got sick, bills stacked up, taxes slipped, and the bank swallowed the place like it was nothing more than a line item. By the time I was old enough to fix it, I was already a mess of my own. I'd spent a couple years recovering from a wreck that put me in a hospital bed in El Paso and taught me how fast life can take things away without asking permission. After Dad died, I stopped driving that road. Too many ghosts. Too much regret. Then last spring, late night, half asleep, scrolling through a government auction portal the way some people scroll dating apps, I saw it. Parcel 17B, abandoned rural asset. No bids, no interest, listed so deep you had to click through 3 pages of dead listings to find it. The price wasn't cheap, but it wasn't impossible. It felt like a dare. I paid cash. No loan, no partner, no ceremony. Just a wire transfer and a county receipt. When I drove out there for the first time in nearly 20 years, the subdivision had crept north like mold, tidy beige houses, trimmed lawns, a stone monument near the asphalt entrance that read Maple Crest Estates, where harmony lives. Harmony. Meanwhile, my dad's old dirt path still peeled off the main road and disappeared into mesquite. I turned onto it, and something in my chest unclenched. The house looked worse than memory, porch sagging, windows boarded, roofline bowed like an old man's spine. Brush swallowed the yard, the kind you don't mow, you fight. But I could see bones. I could see a second chance. I forced the front door open, dust rolled out like a sigh, and inside I found little pieces of my past still hanging on, faded wallpaper, a crack in the kitchen window from a BB gun I absolutely lied about when I was 10, a rusted nail in the doorframe where Dad used to hang his keys. Out in the shed, under scrap metal and a collapsed shelf, I found his old hammer, initials burned into the handle. HH, the grip split, but still solid. I ran my thumb across those letters until the dirt came off on my skin and I swear it felt like a handshake. That first month, I worked like a man trying to prove something to a ghost. I cleared brush until my arms went numb, rebuilt fence sections, patched siding, rewired a breaker box that looked like raccoons had held a convention inside it. I slept on the floor because the bed frame had turned into termites, and I didn't care. The air smelled like cedar and sweat and freedom. The neighbors out on the dirt road started nodding when they drove by, the quiet kind of respect that doesn't need a conversation. One older guy, boots older than my truck, stopped and introduced himself as Boone, said he'd known my father, handed me black coffee in a dented thermos, and gave me a warning that sounded like a joke. Watch them Maple Crest folks. They'll claim your shadow if you let him. I laughed then. I shouldn't have. Because 3 weeks later came the SUV, the clipboard, and the word integration. They handed me an envelope through the gate. Thick paper, embossed crest, legal language polished enough to blind you. It listed violations like they'd been watching me with binoculars: non-conforming fencing, unapproved structural work, firearm activity near community trails, and my personal favorite, refusal to comply with membership dues under encirclement alignment. Encirclement alignment. I actually laughed out loud on my porch, not because it was funny, but because it was so bold. It was the kind of bold you only get when you've pushed people around for years and nobody has ever shoved back. But once the laughter drained out, I felt that pressure in my chest, the same pressure I feel when a fraud case finally clicks into place. Because the letter didn't just ask for compliance. It threatened property encumbrance if I didn't appear before their compliance board. That's a fancy way of saying, we're going to mess with your title until you fold. And I didn't buy this land to fold again. So I did what I always do when someone tries to bluff me with paperwork. I built a file. I scanned my deed, the county exemption note attached to the sale, the recorded boundary map, the tax receipts, everything. I printed duplicates. One folder stayed on my desk, one went in a safe, and one I left with Boone, because old men like Boone understand the value of backups. 2 days later, another envelope appeared, no postmark, hand-delivered. Inside was a grainy drone photo of my back pasture, my private shooting lane behind the shed circled in red. A typed note said, "Community members have expressed concern." Community members. Right. Because nothing says community like spying on a man from 200 feet up, then acting offended by what you saw on his own property. That night, I went to town and bought cameras, motion lights, a cheap little audio recorder, and a steel sign I bolted to the gate that read, "Private property. Video and audio recording in use." I wasn't trying to intimidate anyone. I was trying to survive what I recognized. A coordinated shakedown. The next morning, I drove to the county recorder's office and asked for every record tied to my parcel. The clerk, Brenda type, glasses on a chain, took one look at my folder and said, "What trouble you in, honey?" I told her, "The kind that wears matching polos." She chuckled, then pulled the files. My parcel was clean, unincorporated, exempt, exactly as recorded. But then she found something else, a recently filed overlay map, 2 months old, showing Maple Crest expansion shading my land beige. She leaned in close, squinted at the seal, and said, "That's weird. We stopped using that stamp after the archive renovation." Translation: that map didn't come through the proper channel. Dead stamp. Wrong seal. And the signature on it belonged to someone who retired years ago. My mouth went dry, then I smiled, slow, because now it wasn't just harassment. It was forgery. And if you work fraud for a living, forgery is the moment the whole thing stops being neighborhood drama and becomes a criminal enterprise. I went home and started cross-referencing the signature with other public filings. Same name popped up on 3 other recent maps tied to Maple Crest. Too consistent. Too clean. Somebody was copying an old signature like it was a rubber stamp. I printed every inconsistency, circled them, stacked them on my desk like a wall. And that night, when my motion light popped on at the gate and headlights flashed then vanished, I stepped onto the porch, looked straight at my camera, and said out loud, "Smile for the record." That's when I called Celine Vargas. Celine isn't just a lawyer. She's the kind of attorney HOA boards whisper about like a curse. Small woman, sharp eyes, voice calm enough to scare you. She used to prosecute property fraud until she got tired of watching people with money buy outcomes. Now she goes after bullies with paperwork and lets the law do the punching. When I sat in her office and told her everything, She didn't interrupt, she just made notes. When I slid the forged map across her desk, her eyebrow lifted a fraction and she said, "Well, they stepped in it." Then she laid out a plan like we were going to war. Step 1. Demand certified boundary verification from the county. Step 2. Send a preservation notice to Maple Crest's attorney warning them that destroying or altering records would be treated like obstruction. Step 3. Build a timeline of every visit, every letter, every drone pass, every time they crossed my gate line. "Don't lose your temper," she told me. "They want you loud. Loud makes you look guilty. Calm makes them panic." I nodded, but inside I was boiling. Not because they annoyed me, because they picked the exact wound that still hurt, the one where I lost this land once already. They weren't just trying to take dirt. They were trying to erase what it meant to get it back. Maple Crest's attorney fired back fast, a thick letter accusing me of defamation, unlawful surveillance, and harassment of board members. Celine laughed when she read it, actually laughed, and said, "Perfect. They just admitted surveillance exists." Then came the summons and mandatory appearance before their compliance board at their community center. Friday at 9 a.m. Celine told me not to go, called it an intimidation circus dressed up like due process. And she was right. But I went anyway, because I'm stubborn, and because I wanted them on record looking me in the eye while they lied. I wore a body cam, legal in my state, and I brought a binder so thick it could stop a small bullet. The community center looked like a postcard for conformity, stone arches, fake Tuscan vibes, air conditioning set to punish outsiders. Inside the boardroom, a dozen people sat around a long table. At the head was the clipboard woman from my gate, except this time she introduced herself as President Alina Crow, like I was supposed to be impressed. She smiled and said, "Mr. Hale, you weren't on the attendance list." I pulled out a chair anyway and said, "Must have been an oversight." The room went quiet in that way that tells you they're used to people being scared. Alina started the speech. "Your parcel has been absorbed into our community boundary." I held up a hand and said, "Stop." Then I slid my documents across the table: deed, exemption letter, certified survey, and the county clerk's note about the dead seal. "My land is unincorporated," I said. "Your overlay is forged." You could feel the oxygen leave the room. One board member tried to talk about shared values. Another tried to pivot to my fence style. Alina's smile cracked for a second, then she went cold. "Your aggressive tone is not conducive," she said. I looked at her and said, "What's not conducive is extortion with fake maps." That's when two security guys by the wall, not real cops, just hired muscle in black polos, took a step forward. Alina said, "This is a private meeting. You're trespassing. Escort him out." And right there, right in front of witnesses, they put hands on me first. One grabbed my arm. I stepped back, kept my balance, and said loudly, "Do not touch me." The second grabbed my shoulder anyway. I didn't swing. I didn't throw punches. I just broke the grip and shoved them off enough to create space, the way you do when someone decides your body is their property. Chairs scraped. Papers flew. Somebody screamed like I'd pulled a gun. And then I heard it, the sound that changes everything, Alina's voice saying, "Call 911. Tell them he's armed." Armed. I felt my stomach drop straight through the floor. Because once that word is in the air, logic stops matching. I backed toward the door with my hands up and said, loud and clear from my body cam, "I'm leaving. I am not armed. You initiated contact." Then I walked outside, sat on the curb in front of their building, hands visible, body cam blinking red, and waited for the police like a man waiting for a storm he didn't ask for. 3 cruisers arrived fast. The officers were tense because they'd been told, "Armed suspect." I didn't move. They cuffed me anyway, patted me down, found nothing but paper, and shoved me in the back seat, while Maple Crest put on their performance inside. At the station, a detective listened to their statements. Then Celine arrived, calm as a judge, and played my footage from the moment I walked in. You could watch the detective's face change as the story collapsed in real time. The calm conversation, the documents, the first grab, Alina's "he's armed" lie, the manufactured panic. When the video ended, Celine looked at him and said, "Now, do you still want to pretend this is about community standards?" The cuffs came off. Charges evaporated. No apology, just the quiet shuffle of people realizing they almost helped a scam become a tragedy. And that's when the real part started. Because once you survive the intimidation, you don't go back to normal. You go on offense. Celine and I took everything. The forged overlays, the dead seal proof, the drone photo, the board summons, the false 911 report, and we handed it to the district attorney's office. We filed civil actions for harassment and attempted title interference. The DA opened a criminal investigation into the forged filings. Subpoenas went out, then search warrants. And suddenly, Maple Crest's Harmony started eating itself alive. A contractor showed up to a board meeting demanding unpaid invoices. A former board volunteer found emails that shouldn't exist. One of their hired security guys flipped and admitted they were told to provoke me on camera so they could file for a restraining order and make the county take the land seriously. That line right there, "take the land seriously," made my blood go cold. Because it confirmed what I suspected from day one. They didn't just want me quiet. They wanted me gone. My 2 acres were a prize, a future entrance feature, a pretty sign, a landscaped corner, maybe a park. My history was inconvenient. My deed was an obstacle. So they tried to bury me under paper. It didn't work. 2 months after that SUV first rolled up, Maple Crest's board president resigned. Then the whole board dissolved under investigation. The forged filings got traced back to a shell company linked to board leadership. Local news ran the story. Residents demanded audits. Their attorney stopped sending threats and started sending settlement feelers. And I'll be honest, the most satisfying moment wasn't seeing anybody embarrassed. It was standing at my gate one quiet evening, wind in the mesquite, cameras humming softly, and realizing the land finally felt like mine again. Not because no one wanted it, but because I defended it and proved it. Now here's the part that's going to spark arguments, and I want it to, because this isn't as simple as HOA bad, ranch guy good. Some people will say, but communities need rules. Sure, I get that. I'm not against rules. I'm against people who invent authority when they see something they want. I'm against the kind of neighbor who hears outside the HOA and translates it to uncontrolled, therefore available. So tell me this. If you were in my boots, would you have played it quiet and tried to negotiate, or would you have done what I did and drag it all into the sunlight, even if it blew up the whole neighborhood in the process? And if you've ever dealt with an HOA power trip, a land grab, a bogus fine, a "we're doing this for property values" lie, I want your story in the comments. Who was right? Who was wrong? And where do you draw the line between community and control? If you made it this far, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because these stories aren't just entertainment. They're warnings. And I've got a feeling a lot of you have seen the same kind of people, with the same kind of clipboard, pulling the same kind of stunt, just with different names.